few years ago, we talked about a band with a lot of enthusiasm. Their second album had just dropped. It was a curious little piece entitled To Perceive is to Suffer. I can remember receiving this and thinking, this could be pretty neat. Something to certainly check out, just to see what we have in store. The result was something that I absolutely liked, and thought that this was something that heavy metal truthfully needed. And here in 2019, their third album has now just dropped. The band's name is Contrarian. To Perceive is to Suffer came out in 2017, and now we have to talk about their brand new album, Their Worm Never Dies. Now this is a group that's able to blend a lot of different things. There's progression that certainly is littered throughout, and you can hear this in some of the awkward and strange patterns that this album and their works from the past have been able to deliver, although this one may be their most far out as of current. But it also has a lot of that technical death metal charm that I would say is a la Death, or especially a la Atheist, and you can sometimes hear this just within the makeup of the songs themselves. The very bass-heavy backbone that this album and these tracks seem to have is very suggestive, not to mention it reminds me of albums such as Unquestionable Presence by Atheist all those years ago. And this is something that here in 2019, it has just as much viability, not to mention is just as impressive, considering it showcases one side of the heavy metal landscape, the building block of a traditional band, in a light that isn't always necessarily shined upon. It's something where specific bands may have a more prominent bass sound that you hear. However, these are the types of groups where it really gets to just go on a frenzy and be on display similar to a guitarist with a fantastic shred pattern, either that or a vocalist that has an exotic range. This is a band actually that has all of those things, because the vocals are able to just really morph along throughout these tracks, and the shredding is definitely present. These are tracks that quite literally, if you're a heavy metal fan, they have just about everything that you're looking for. But going into the album itself and going into its opening tracks, these elements are completely and totally on display. We have those nice little shreds in order to get things going, and once again, the backdrop and even the mix job on this album certainly is suggesting that sort of early 90s harkening back, although it does have some of the more modern, pop behind it. But this is still something where it has that sort of semi-distant feel that then cascades in waves along a listener's eardrums in order to deliver more and more sound. And this is all sound that feels like chaos, but very controlled. So everything sort of does have its place. But you do hear that very quick pattern quite often that's very reminiscent of that early age of death metal. It's something that you can hear quite a bit on tracks such as Exorcism or even My Curse during the first half of this disc, going into further songs such as The Petition, which I find to be a really curious song considering the way this song is able to begin is using a lighter tone, a lighter strum of the guitar. In fact, it's a tone that I really haven't heard that much since Modeling of the Well, and of course they're more avant-garde, but that's just the tone that I get from the very opening measures of this song. And I love the way that this is able to do something that this album does quite often, which is start with a slower, a softer, a more melodic section, and then explode into your big, full-scale death metal production. The Petition is a really strong track, definitely one of the highlights of the first half of this album. But this is a disc that in its second half only gets lengthier, and considering this is only a 7-track album, it's one whose 37 minutes do not feel like a very long passage of time, principally because it isn't. And as a result, this is an album, Their Worm Never Dies, that does not feel like it overstays its welcome. It instead is a welcome friend, one that perhaps is telling you a frenzied story for, 37 minutes. You're laughing, you're crying, you're in awe, you're glued, and you're glued to this album. Going with Among the Misled, it has this very addictive, almost soloed out piece that is repeated multiple times throughout this track, almost focusing in as a sort of change point. If you've ever looked at trains where they have those switch stations, it's almost like whenever you hear this little moment, which is, like I said, very soloed out, just the guitar itself with maybe some minimal percussion, that's whenever you know that the song is about to change, or the song is about to transition to its next point. I really like this idea, despite the fact that it does kind of damage the flow a little bit, but I like the idea. I think it's cool that they tried something a little bit different with this song. Not to mention, the actual portion itself sounds like it would be great in a Mega Man game. So, Contrarian, if you guys are looking for something to do on the side, maybe scope out some Mega Man boss theme covers or something like that. You certainly seem like you have the ability to do so. Not to mention, you'd make it sound absolutely absurd, which they're already absurd, so double absurd. Absurd squared. Wow, that's something else. Now, the title track on this album is more so of an instrumental, and it's one that's able to carry us over into Whomsoever Worships the White Worm, which is the epic final track that this album is able to deliver. At 8 minutes, it is easily the longest song, and it's one that is able to once again utilize the same idea from Among the Misled. This is one that has a section that is more so as a break, something that is used to kind of separate sections, either that or just give you a quick little breather. Now, I know a lot of people enjoy songs that have no breaks, songs that are just absolute sledgehammers or steamrollers throughout the entirety of its runtime. But with the progressive nature of Contrarian, and specifically this track, Whomsoever Worships the White Worm, you need these little breaks, you need this little deviation in order to give the entire song an entirely new flow pattern, in order to truly traverse some new grounds, and really to show the diversity that you yourselves have as an artist. And that's exactly what Contrarian are able to contribute to the metal landscape with this track. I love this as a closer, considering it also being an epic, and also being a very well tailored epic, is something that stays with you after that final note is strummed and the album finishes up. Not to mention, it provides you and builds up enough excitement that you want to go right back up to the very first track, The Evil Eye, and listen to this all over again. And considering the runtime, once again, that makes the re-listenability of this album, which is great musically, a little bit easier to imagine. It's something where you can easily see yourself going back to track 1 and saying, I could do that again with ease. And that's the thing. It becomes very addicting. Again, this is a side of metal that may be a little bit more for the old school metal fans that remember death metal from the first part of the 90s. It has enough bends and progression and unique patterns that would satisfy the new school prog hounds that also really enjoy the more extreme side of heavy metal. And I think it also is just a group that has enough of that sort of savoir-faire and knowledge about who they are and ability to continue to push themselves. They're not afraid to take risks, that this could apply to a lot of different people. Again, that sort of old school sound to it may not be something that's for everybody, but it's something that's such a small, subtle nuance that I doubt that there could be a lack of appreciation based solely around that. And plus, that's something that only really takes place in certain moments, and again, it is showing respect to the past. I really like what this album does aside from that. There's very few complaints that I would really have to possess it. Maybe a couple of the songs have some similar riff patterns as their skeleton in order to move portions of songs along, but that would be about it. All in all, it's a quick album that flows well and delivers big time whenever it comes to its epic finale. And those are all things that spell great things. They're 3 albums in, and Contrarian, I think, is starting to move and is starting to really generate some more waves in the community. And this is one that needs to go one step further. So your homework assignment as a fan is to scope out this album. They have a Bandcamp that I'm going to link to you down in the description box below. And then your homework assignment, if you liked what you heard, show it to someone else. Hell, show it to 5 people. Show it to a heavy metal group. Do something in order to further this name, considering what I like about this band so much is that they feel very accessible as a group, and I dig that a lot. And considering there are so many people that were going nuts over, what was that, Horrendous? That basically sounded like a death ripoff, that is still also really good, or was that Horrified? I forget the band's name off the top of my head right at this moment, which I feel terrible about. Apologies to that band. But again, that was a group that was seen as a really, really good idea, a really, really big deal. Contrarian feels like they're among that same cycle, but they're a little more individualistic, and they have a little bit more progression going for them. This is a 23 out of 30, really strong album. I encourage you all to check it out, and once you do, in the comment section below, please tell me what you thought. I'm sure the band will be checking it out, considering they asked me to review this. So thank you very much, Contrarian, for asking me to do so. Again, let me know what you think. My name is coverkillernation. I'll talk to all of you guys next time. You guys take care. Oh yeah, by the way, Cornell is well.